Hey, welcome back to MobilityWOD. We have a local coach, Zoe, on hand. And the reason, what we want to talk about today is you have an athlete who has sprained her ankle. You were doing pull-ups, came down, and someone had slipped a PVC pipe under your ankle, which is a legitimate injury, not like self-made injury, right? I wasn't running a million miles or in box jumps. This is legit. But that ankle still isn't quite working right, yes?
Correct.
Okay, so what do you do as an athlete and what do you do as a coach? So one of the things that we're assessing is, look, she's back in the game. We know that in ankle healing time, a turned ankle is a 4 to 6 week process when it's a bad one, right? Mm-hmm. First order of business always is about getting swelling down, which you've done. I've been seeing you compressing it. You're protecting your range of motion, but now it's time to start to you're at the end range of that thing. And one of the things we want to do is make sure that she has a plan around a couple mobilizations to restore position. So for starters, let's just sit here and pull your ankles up. Do you feel like you're restricted on one range of motion?
Yes.
I can't tell. Is it this one?
Yes.
Yes. And I don't know if you can tell that, but that's what we call eyes and logic, right? You can tell that something's missing. And come on in here, Nathan. There's a couple things I want to show. Take off your sock on that side, would you? This ankle is still, well, I'm not going to say that you look fat. Your ankle looks fat.
I got a little cankle.
You got a cankle. So what we know is that, hey, I still have some tissues that are effused, and that's a problem, but you're a coach and you stand on your feet all day.
Yes.
So this is a problem. You're always balanced. So one of the things that she's done is she is wearing a compression bandage, but getting in a compression sock. Just leave that thing off because we're gonna take a look at it. But we want to be thinking, hey, when you're at home, how can you get ahead of this? Putting your foot up, Mark Pro, compression, anything. But what ends up happening is you're on your foot for 8 or 10 hours and it's swollen and you cannot get ahead of it. Then you go home and you're like, last thing I want to do as a coach is spend another 8 hours working on my foot. So you just have a beer and you're like, well, I'll put my beer on my ankle and it doesn't seem to be working really well. Okay, so, but we also know that, hey, if we're at the end of this, there's no reason she shouldn't have normal range of motion, even if the tissues are still knitting down. So there's a couple things that I would assess as a therapist that I want to show you. Okay, so one of the things we're looking at in this is that you can see how puffy it is, right? And as long as I have an athlete who's got any swelling in a joint, unequivocally, that's our top priority because the joint can't work like a joint when it's swollen. So we're going to manage swelling, and Voodoo Floss is a fantastic way to do that. So even today, she's going to leave here with a wrap of Voodoo Floss, and just can she wrap that Voodoo Floss, just compress super tight, like 8 out of 10 from the foot up, and just rock it for a minute or so. Hang out until you feel like you're going to explode and then pop it off. And during the course of the day, there's going to be a few moments. So it's not the best compression, but it's something we can do to get our athlete ahead of the swelling curve, especially when she has to be on her feet all day long. Secondarily, one of the things we're going to look at is that I need this joint to move. So this is the bottom of her fibula where it comes into the ankle, and it needs to glide posteriorly as the ankle dorsiflex. Now you see a couple things here. She classically has this gigantic bone spur, this dinosaur egg thing going on her heel, and that's because she has been turned out for a long time and her Achilles is pulling down. So that gives me a little bit of a cue, and you can see that bone spur here, that gives me a little bit of a cue that she is not having good ankle mechanics already, and then we sprain it and then we're kind of double jammed, right? Scoot back just a smidge. So one of the things that we would do as a therapist is I would take my hand and I would get this thing to glide backwards. So I'm feeling this, and this joint doesn't move at all. And if this joint doesn't move, it feels super jammed here, and it doesn't move, that when she dorsiflex her foot, she literally runs into a wall here. And the goal is to have this fibula be able to glide backwards as the foot comes forward and as that talus comes forward. Remember, calcaneus is the heel bone, and above it is the talus. And the talus is the mortar and pestle between the inside ankle and the outside ankle. So that makes the stirrup, and then we're looking at how well the stirrup is moving in relationship to the talus. So typically, and you can see the amount of swelling here, this is the area where she sprained her ankle, and this is the ATF, the anterior talar fibular ligament, and this is what gets stretched out or challenged a little bit, right, this ATF. And so the idea here is, hey, this tissue is splinting, we've got to normalize that. She's walking around, she's not limping, she's already doing a ton, but she's working. So we want to make sure that this joint is moving. So how do I do that myself? Let me show you, girl. We've got a softer ball here, And what you're going to do is you place this ball in front of the fibula here, right? So there's the fibula. It goes right here. And then what you do is you're going to push your ankle forward, ball jams the fibula, so instead of me moving the fibula, you're moving the whole leg, the fibula stays in place, and then you can actually add some motion in there. So we can get this mobilization with motion, load the ankle, get the fibula to glide, and then just pull the foot up and just do some for a few.
Okay.
Right?
Not gonna hurt at all.
Well, that's between you and your foot, isn't it? It's a personal decision. But do you see how you can load that up right in front? Just start by pushing forward, and you're just trying to move that whole segment so that the fibula blocks, and you're just trying to move that bone sliding backwards. Now start adding a little dorsiflexion in there, a little ankle wibble as you do it. And now she's encouraging that joint to restore its normal motion, simultaneously getting that foot to start to flex through that. So she's pushing and then flexing that foot. So see if you can flex that foot too. Good. And then come out. And this is the kind of thing that you cannot overdo after an ankle sprain. So people are like, how much do I do this? Do 20 or 30 reps, just like that as you're messing around. This is in your pocket, you're hanging out, you're noodling on your ankle, and if you hit it a couple times a day, you're going to get an A+. If you hit it once a day, you're going to get an A. Okay. Right? But I know that you're just a B student, so A student.
Less than A-.
Nothing less than A-, that's right. So this is one of the easiest ways to restore this joint, and any good therapist after an ankle sprain is going to take a look at this, among other things, but we're going to manage swelling, and then we're going to say, hey, let's restore motion in the joint so that we can continue to move. Now, one of the problems with an ankle sprain is that we have something called a retinaculum down here, which is a big band of connective tissue that keeps all of the tendons from bowstringing. If I didn't have this clamp of connective tissue here, when I flex my foot, for example, the tendon would go from my toe up to my knee, bang, right? So, but the retinaculum does a lot to trap fluid below it, especially when I'm fighting gravity all day long. So she's doing the right thing by getting movement in there, but understanding that, hey, if we can get the fluid compressed above this retinaculum through some voodoo flossing, then we can at least start to pump it out with our legs. But right now it's sort of trapped in there. You've got, a rubber band on, and you're like, I don't understand what's going on. Right? So that's homework number one. Homework number two is very simple. Come on over here. Besides, actually, homework number three, we've got voodoo floss during the day. We've got some of those. Now, real quick, sit here and show us, did that change your ankle range of motion? Just so weird.
A little less tight.
A little less tight. Stand on it. Tell me. We like to say better, same, worse. Is it better, same, worse?
Better.
Technically, what we should say is, how are your symptoms now as compared to, and see, it's not a leading question. Right? You're like, so anyway, but the idea is,
okay,
hey,
yeah.
if you can't see change, you didn't make change, right? It's that obvious. You're like, oh, okay, that works. And what's important about showing our athletes change is she's going to be using this all day long, and she's like, you know what you need to do to improve your ankle range of motion. You just saw it, so we got a hook right there. So that's an important part of this consummation process, right? That you're like, hey, I just improved my ankle range of motion with this really easy thing, and it feels less tight. Good.
Motivation to do it later.
Yeah. Okay. So the next thing. We're going to get a little long distraction. So she sits down on the ground. You're just going to wrap this around your foot. We're just going to get a little traction through the ankle. Go ahead and back up now. So now what's happening is that we're pulling the ankle joint apart a little bit. So in this distraction, we can normalize the capsule, and then she can take another band and just get a little dorsiflexion with the band. So she can be active, pulling back, and then pointing your toe. Go ahead and pull, and then point, and then pull back. And in this way, because the band is really hooked right at her calcaneus here, do you see where it's right on the heel? We're able to get motion in that calcaneus to lengthen, so she's not just jamming in the front, but now lengthening from the back to improve that motion. And she gets a little overpressure, because we've got to be able to overpress this. So she could do any of our classic band mobilizations, but in an ankle sprain, this feels good. Oh, you're pulling the joint apart, you're giving some space. It doesn't feel like I'm just compressing a water balloon inside a little tight space, right? So you're creating more space in the joint. And this distraction concept is as old as time. This is what all the osteopaths were doing when they invented osteopathic medicine. So again, spending 20 or 30 reps once or twice a day gives you an A. And the idea is to constantly be noodling on it. She's already training, I know you are, which is what we should be doing, right? And then while we're simultaneously letting that healing time of 4 to 6 weeks happen, she eats like a ninja already, I know, plus we have a few other key pieces. These 3 things, voodoo floss for compression during the day, get that fibular glide, get a little distraction with some overpressure, that ankle goes from ghosting you for another 2 or 3 weeks to, hey, I'm on my healing time, and I start to go back. Make sense?
Yeah.
See you guys tomorrow.